everyone, I've got a zipper skills tutorial for you today. We are covering part 2 of the curved zippers, and we will be talking about concave zippers. I'm going to be demonstrating using a concave curve on the Pythagorean pouch, and as there was for the convex zipper, I do have a template that you can download so that you can practice doing these zippers. But I did want to caveat that the Pythagorean pouch is not the ideal shape for this style of zipper installation. So while you can do it, I am going to draft a new pattern that will be better suited to teaching this style of curved zipper. But in keeping with the previous zipper skills video, I'm first going to teach you using the Pythagorean pouch, and I will go into more detail about concave zippers in another tutorial that I will have for you once I have drafted a pattern that I can use to teach that skill. So let's get going. The problem that I see come up most frequently when it comes to sewing concave zippers, which are zippers that curve in towards the main part of your bag, is that they have waves in them. Waves, generally, when it comes to zippers, result from the zipper being too long for the space that they are being sewn into. Compared to straight zippers, where the length at the edge of your zipper tape, at your stitch line, and your coils will be uniform, when you have a concave zipper, in order to get the zipper to fit at the line of the seam allowance, it has to be a certain length. The zipper, where the teeth are, is actually in a smaller area. If you think about it like concentric circles, the diameter of the circle where the seam allowance is greater than the diameter of the circle where the zipper teeth actually sit. So you would need a shorter length where your zipper teeth are than you would at the line where your seam allowance is. And both of those measurements are going to be less than the length at the very edge of your zipper tape. So in order to reduce the likelihood of waves in your zipper, you have to use the measurement where the zipper teeth actually sit, not the measurement where your seam allowance is. However, your zipper tape is cut at one length. The way around that is to ease your zipper tape around the curve. And that is why, in my humble opinion, it is necessary to snip your zipper tape in order to get a well-installed curved zipper. In part 1 of these videos, I spoke about how you can curve a zipper when the tape remains flat quite easily and not get any waves in that zipper. However, once you sew your bag together and the zipper is essentially folded in half, it becomes a lot more difficult for that zipper to follow the curve. And that is because of the rigidity in these zipper teeth and also because of the number of zipper teeth that it has. So you want the length of your zipper to be correct for where the teeth are going to sit. So if I were to install this zipper, I want the length to come from where the teeth are going to be. Or ideally, it will be slightly less than that, so that there'll be space for those coils once the zipper is curved around. This is especially true if you are using size 5 zipper tape, as once you put a curve in that zipper, you end up with more teeth than there is space for, and that is why you end up with a ripple in your zipper. So the way to do that is to shorten this section of the zipper tape, but you still need to be able to sew it in place. So by adding snips, you can expand the zipper so that you can still sew it in position where your stitch line will be, but reduce the number of coils at the top. So I'm going to show you how I measure that out, and then we will sew a concave zipper. I am working with a Pythagorean pouch, and I'm going to measure how long I want my zipper to be, and I'm also going to draw in my seam allowance line. On this particular pattern, I'm going to be starting my zipper 5/8 of an inch from the outside edge. Whatever pattern you are using will tell you where the zipper is going to start and stop. And those are the points that you're going to use. So I have my starting point and my stopping point for my zipper. And I need to measure this curve. Once I've taken my seam allowance, this top part of the bag will fold over like so. And then my zipper will sit just above that. So that's how I determine where to measure the length I want for my zipper tape. So I'm going to use the edge of this pattern piece, and I'm going to measure that with a piece of string, the same way as I did in the convex video. So I'm measuring from one end to the other end, making sure that I'm not stretching my string at all, just laying it against the edge of my pattern piece. And then I'm going to measure that string, and that is 6 3/4 of an inch. So that is how long I want my finished zipper to be. So using that measurement, I'm going to cut my zipper tape. I'm going to place my zipper pull, and I'm going to turn out the zipper ends because I'm doing a single tab zipper. And then I want to measure my zipper tape. So I want it to measure 6 3/4 of an inch after I have placed my tab on the end. I have used a 1 3/4 inch square to create a double fold tab. Fold it in half, wrong sides together, and press the fold. Then open it back out, fold the raw edges in to meet that crease. Again, wrong sides together, and then fold it back in half on the original crease to create the double fold tab that I am going to be using at the closed end of my zipper. You want to make sure that you are measuring from the edge of your coils to where the edge of your tab will be. So you have to allow for the fold of the tab. So when I cut it, I'm actually going to cut it a little shy of 6 3/4 of an inch. Making sure that the pull is on. I'm going to cut straight across, singe the end. I'm going to wrap my double fold tab around the end, and then I am going to sew that tab on. And once that is sewn on, that will give me a zipper with a finished length of 6 3/4 of an inch. With that tab sewn on, I'm going to mark the centers of my zipper tape and my pattern pieces. I want to make sure that on the back of both exterior pieces, I have the mark where I want my zipper to start and stop. Again, you'll get that marking from the pattern that you're using. If you are going to use this Pythagorean pouch, you're making that mark 5/8 of an inch in from this outside edge. Now, working with one of your exterior panels at a time, we're going to match up the center of our zipper tape and the outside ends with those 3 landmarks. You want your coils to be right up where that marking is. The tab at the other end, matching up with that mark. And then the center point there in the middle. And you can see that that zipper is shorter at the edge of the zipper tape than this curve here. But that is on purpose so that when we finish sewing the bag, the coils themselves will have enough space and not have any waves. So what we also need to do is put small snips in this zipper tape so that we can ease it to meet that curve. And once we have those snips in, we are better able to match the edge of the zipper tape with the edge of our pattern piece. And what we're now going to do is baste the first side of the zipper to the exterior. I'm going to sew with the exterior side down to help the excess fabric of the exterior panel ease along the length of that zipper. I'm going to baste it at 1/4 of an inch, which will be inside my final seam allowance. You can use double-sided tape if you like to help keep this in position. But the important things are making sure the center mark stays matched up and the ends of our zipper tape stay matched up with those marks that we made in the beginning. You can put marks on the front also so that you can make sure that you're keeping it lined up. Opening out the zipper tape can help also. We're basting, but I'm going to backstitch at the very end just to hold that in position. And just follow the curve around. Making sure that that center point remains lined up. I'm keeping the tab pulled all the way out to the mark at the side. Now that that's sewn, you can see that there's a little bit of a ripple here, and that is actually what we want. Once we have sewn the zipper in place, we are going to clip the material also so that it can splay out and sit flat. Take the second side and match up the center and those tab and coil ends, the same way as we did on the first side. You want the end of your zipper where the tab or the coils are to be meeting up with that line at the line of your seam allowance, whether that is 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, 5/16 of an inch. You want the tab to be crossing over where the seam allowance will be. So it's not enough to just have it come to the edge there. If it then pulls away, you want to make sure that it is meeting up at the line where the seam allowance is, the same way as we did for the convex zipper. I will put those little snips in again. I know not everybody likes to do snips. I do snips. I will put fray check on it. The weave of the zipper tape that I use hasn't given me any issues with snips. I understand that's not everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. This is how I install my curved zippers to give me the best results. If you don't want to do it that way, that is up to you. This is just the method that I use. Okay, that is clipped in place. I'm going to baste the second side. This time I'm starting at the tab end so that I can still sew with my main panel down and following that curve along. You want to make sure that the other end is staying matched up with the mark on your exterior. You can baste the very ends first if you like, if you're having trouble with them shifting while you're sewing. I'm just using the snips in the zipper tape to help it ease around that curve. So you can see our concave zipper is starting to take shape. Now we need to sew the lining pieces. We're going to be sandwiching the zipper. The zipper is coil side down on the exterior, and we will then place our lining panel so that it is right sides down on the back of the zipper. It can be a little trickier to see because we've already sewn the second side in place. You're just going to match up the center mark on your lining panel and match up the outside edges. Again, it appears that there's a bit of a ripple there, and that is because the zipper is shorter than the panel. But when we go to finish up our bag, this ripple here is what will allow the zipper to sit flat without a ripple so that you won't have ripples on your finished bag. So I'm going to sew the first side of my zipper, sewing through exterior, zipper tape, and my lining panel. When I'm sewing down the curved edge, I am starting at the outside edge, backstitching, sewing all the way along, and backstitching again at the other end. My camera did not record when I just sewed up this seam, so I'm going to show you again. I am sewing at 5/16 of an inch. You will use whatever seam allowance your pattern tells you to use. It also may be beneficial to use a slightly wider seam allowance, as that reduces the amount of tape that is available to cause ripples. I find that using the 5/16 of an inch is adequate, but you can use 3/8 of an inch if you prefer. Unless you were using size 3 zipper tape, I would not use 1/4 of an inch. So just starting at one end, back stitching, I am sewing lining side down, sewing all the way along, following the curve, being careful of the tab and the coils, keeping that stitch line as straight as I can so that wonky stitch lines do not contribute to a wavy or wonky zipper on my finished bag. If you need a hump jumper to get over the coils, you can use that and backstitch at the other end. So now we attach the second side. I'm going to sew both linings in place before I top stitch. I'm just going to clip the first lining out of the way and then work on the second side. Matching up the center of my lining with the center of my exterior, matching up the outside edges, and then clipping along, easing the excess material around the length of the zipper. When you are installing a zipper like this, it's essentially a gusset. So the same way as you need to snip into a gusset to have it ease around a curve, such as if you're making a circle bag or a similar style bag, I find it is necessary to snip your zipper. So we're going to be sewing the same way as we did the first side, matching the seam allowance that we used on the first side and doing our best to keep all of the edges lined up, keep the centers matched up, and as consistent of a seam allowance as we can, following the curve. Slide the zipper pull out of the way as you need to. Trim all of your threads. Then before I top stitch, I like to check that I have consistent spacing on either side of my zipper tape. Now, looking at this bag, you can see that the zipper in the center can sit pretty smooth and flat, but the outside ripples a little bit. This is kind of what I was talking about when I said that the Pythagorean pouch is not ideal for a curved zipper installation, but it's also because when the bag is done, it will sit like this. And that will allow both the zipper to sit nice and flat and the body of the bag to also be flat. We can aid that by snipping into this curve. The ripples here are because of the difference in the length. And when we top stitch, we want the bag to sit like this. In order to get it to splay out and to sit nice and flat, I find that adding small snips within the seam allowance and then adding some fray check helps that finished bag to sit much more neatly when it's all done. It wants to pull up a bit right now because of the length here. The length at this outside edge is shorter than the length where we have sewn here. So for it to sit flat, we need to put in the snips. I'm also going to make sure I put a snip at the outside edge of my zipper tape that will help the corner to sit nice and flat. I'm going to be applying fray check, and that will reduce the risk of fraying. You don't have to do wedges because this is going to be splaying out. Just snips will be enough. And you can see with those snips in place, it helps that material to sit a lot more flat, and that will translate to a nicer finish on our fully assembled concave zippered pouch. I'm just going to make sure that I apply fray check to all of those little snips. We're now ready to top stitch. I'm going to be top stitching just through my exterior, so I'll be folding my lining out of the way and top stitching from one end all the way to the other end. The alternative would be to top stitch through your exterior and your lining by folding it over nice and flat, and then starting your top stitching at the end of the tab, sewing along next to your zipper, and finishing up again at the other end. You would not sew all the way to the end if you were sewing through both your exterior and your lining, as that will result in having pinched in corners at the outside edge of your bag. So I'm going to top stitch through just my exterior and the seam allowance where I have sewn my zipper, lining, and exterior together. Pulling my lining nice and flat at the point that I'm sewing. Here it's a little ripply, and that's okay. It's just because of the excess material as you go around the curve. You just want to make sure that it's smooth where you're sewing. So I'm just going to shift that as I go. Repeat for the other side. So we've got that zipper sewn in place and top stitched, and now you would proceed with the rest of your particular pattern as usual. I'm going to be matching up the outside edges of this Pythagorean pouch. Match up the fold where the exterior and the lining meet. I find if I slide my zipper pull to the middle, it helps get everything lined up because it takes that bulk away from the edge of the pouch. I'm going to first sew my exterior, starting at my stitch line, sewing all the way down, sewing across the bottom and then up the side, and then I will box those corners. And then I'm actually going to switch my thread color to a lighter thread color to sew the lining side seams, box those corners, and then turn it out. Once you finish sewing up the rest of your bag, turn it out. You can press and gently shape your bag. You can see that you have your finished concave zipper. As I mentioned, there will be a PDF with the curved zipper line on the Pythagorean pouch for you to practice on if you like. You can use these techniques for measuring and sewing your concave zippers in position on other curved zipper patterns, and I will have, hopefully in the not too distant future, a follow-up video with a pattern that I have drafted specifically for curved zippers so that we can continue to practice this bag making skill. Hope that helps. Thanks everyone. So that is very secure now. It just makes sense to me because of the way circles work.